Hey guys, welcome back to this course. In the previous video we had explored the math tab right here. In this video let's go ahead with the sets tab. So under the sets tab you see it tells you this tab contains 5 panels and 88 components. So we are obviously not going to explore all the 5 panels and the 88 components, but we are surely going to explore some of the very important components under all of these tabs that we have right here. So let's go ahead and start the first one, which is list item. So let's understand where the list item component is located first. You can just use your alt and your mouse click to understand that. It is the first component under list in the sets tab. So I have used a series component over here, and I've inputted the start, the step and the count, and I've gotten a series of numbers that I am showing through my panel right here. And what I've done is, from this series of numbers, I'm actually extracting one particular number, and that is what I'm doing with the list item component. So the list item component, if you keep your mouse on the component, it will actually tell you what it does. It retrieves a specific item from a list. So I have a list over here. These are my list of numbers. So that's the input that I'm giving in the list input, and the index is basically the index that I want to see, the index that I want to work with, the index that I want to show. So the index is 12. So as you can see from this particular list, let's go to the 12th index. So I have 0. It always starts with a 0. So if I have 25 numbers, it always starts with a 0 and ends at 24. If I have 100 numbers, it always starts with a 0 and ends at 99. So over here, as you can see, I have 73 numbers, 73 locally defined values. So I have 0 to 72. So out of these 0 to 72 numbers, which is basically 73 numbers, I have selected the 12th index. So which means let's go to index number 12. Index number 12 has this particular number, 10.164. So as you can see from the output of this list item component, I am receiving 10.164. So it basically retrieves a particular item from a list of numbers or a list of geometry or a list of anything at all. It will basically retrieve the item at that particular index. So all these things on the side, these are the indexes, and these are the values or the numbers or the data that we are retrieving. Now let's take a look at the second component, which is item index. Item index is right here. Under sets, under the list tab, you have your item index right here. So the item index takes two inputs. It takes the list input and the item input, and it basically gives you the index of a certain item. So it's basically the opposite of this particular component. This particular component takes in a list and an index, and it gives you the value at that particular index. And this particular component takes in a list and the item, and it gives you the index of that item. So it's complete reversal of this particular component. So say the item that I actually want to retrieve the index of is 10.164. So I've inputted 10.164 from here to the item, and the list in which the item is contained is basically this list, this panel output that I have, that I've attached over here. And the index that it spits out is 12. So as you can see, 10.164 right here is at the 12th index. So over here I'm inputting 12 and I'm getting 10.164 as the output, and over here I'm inputting 10.164 as the input and I'm getting 12 as the output. So it's the item and the item index. So let's go to the next component, which is insert items. So under insert items, I have basically these sets of inputs. It asks for a list. I have the list right here. All these inputs that I've used the same list, which is this list that I've created from the series component over here. So I've inputted the list over here. Then I have the item. So the item that I want to insert in this list is 2. And whenever you create this kind of a panel, so say you double click and type panel and bring in the panel component. Now you say you double click and type 2 and you press enter, and if you click outside, you see it does not look the same. If you want it to look the same, you basically have to select it first, do a right click, click on multi-line data. So that creates the index. So if you click on multi-line data, now you see you have 2 at 0 and empty at 1, which means there is an empty space over there. So you have to double click and delete that space. You see your cursor is over here. You have to click on backspace and delete that space. Now if you click outside, you see you have the same thing going on over here. If you don't want this panel thing, just select it, do a right click, delete the panel from the top over here, and you'll have the same thing basically. And you can decrease it and use it like this. So I'll delete this for now. And I've inputted this inside the item, and the indices is basically 10. So at 10, at the 10th index, I am inserting this particular item in this list. So basically you see now as the output, I have the same list, but at the 10th index, I have inserted 2. So I have 2. So if I change this to say 67 and press enter, but don't press enter, otherwise that will create an extra null item over there. Just click on backspace and click on anywhere outside in the canvas. Now I have to input 67. So 67 will be inputted at the 10th index. So as you can see, in 10 I have 67. You can do this with numbers as you have right now. You can do this with values, with geometry, with anything that you want to. Now let's take a look at the next component, which is reverse list. This is the component. If you use your alt and your mouse click, you will understand where reverse list is located. And you also have this particular list that I have reversed. So as you can see, I have inputted this list once again. This list started with 0 and ends with 60.984. And when you reverse the list, you actually have the first value as 60.984 and the last value as 0, which means that this component reverses the order of a list. Now the next component is sort list. Sort list is basically it sorts any list in the ascending order or in the descending order if you want to. So I've inputted this particular list which started with the biggest number and ended with the smallest number, and I've inputted this list inside keys, and it gives me this list of values now, which is basically sorted in the ascending order. So it once again starts with 0 and it ends with 60.984. Now let's take a look at the next component, which is shift list. I've used the same list that I'm using in all these components as the input, and I have basically input a number slider over here which says 4 inside shift. Now what that will do is it will shift 4 values from the starting of this list. So the first 4 values will be shifted towards the end of the list. So as you can see, it starts with 3.388 now. So before that, over here 3.388 is at 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, these 4 numbers are shifted towards the end, and the list basically starts with this. So 3.388 comes out at the top as you have over here, and you have all the other values on the bottom. As you can see, 0, and you have 0.847, 1.694, all these values are at 0, 1, 2, 3. So as you can see over here, these were at 0, 1, 2, 3. You have shifted these 4 values on the bottom. What you can also do is you can use this particular number slider to change that. So if I change it to 5 or to 6, it basically shifts those many values at the bottom. So as you can see, now it starts with the 6th, now it starts with the 7th and 8th and so on. Now let's go to the next component, which is split list. If you use the split list component, you can basically split a list into 2 halves. So I have input the index as 5. So first 5 values will be stored in list A, and the other 5 values, and the other 5 or 6 or 7 or how many values does the list have, it depends on that. Those many values will be stored in the next list. So you see I have 68 values stored in this particular list, which is list B, and it is termed as 0 to 67, which means 68 values, and I have 0 to 4 values, which means the first 5 values are stored in list A. So if you change that, it basically changes the whole construct of this list. So now I have 23 values in list A, which is 0 to 22, and I have 0 to 49 values, which means 50 values in list B. So you can basically split a list into 2 parts. Now let's go to the next component, which is dispatch. If you use the dispatch component, it's the same logic which applies over here. Only under dispatch you can actually give a splitting pattern, which means under dispatch pattern, if I give 0, 1, 0, 1, 0 always stands for false in Grasshopper and 1 stands for true in Grasshopper. which means 0 stands for on and 1 stands for off. 0 stands for true and 1 stands for false. That's how 0 and 1 works in the Boolean language. So if I input this inside dispatch pattern, what this will do is it will split up this particular list, this whole list, as 0 1 0 1, which means the pattern will continue throughout the entire list. So alternate numbers, which means 0 2 4 6, these numbers will be in one list, and 1 3 5 7, these numbers will be in the second list, which is exactly what has happened, as you can see over here. Now let's look at the next component, which is cull index. Cull means basically to delete. To cull is to delete. So you just have to input the list. You have to input the indices at which indexes you actually want to delete, and it will basically delete those particular indexes. For example, I've actually deleted index number 9 over here. Index number 9 over here consists of 10.164. Let's see what index 9 consists in the original list. 7.623. So I've basically deleted that, which means I don't have the same number over here at index 9. Now let's take a look at the cull pattern. Cull pattern is very similar to dispatch, only in dispatch you basically split the list according to your pattern, and in cull pattern you delete certain elements according to your pattern. So you basically input a Boolean logic, which is like 0101 or 0011 or 000111. It can be anything that you want it to be, and it basically deletes those particular elements in this particular pattern. So I have basically input this entire list and I have deleted all the items in the list according to this pattern. Now let's take a look at range. Now range basically creates a domain of numbers which you have to input in its domain input, and steps. You have to input the steps, which means how many numbers do you want in that domain, and it will give you the range of those numbers. So say for example I have a domain of numbers from 0.165 to 0.948, and I have already explained domain in the previous topic. So under these domain of numbers I can have infinite numbers. I can have so many numbers from 0.165 to 0.948. But if I split it up into 10 parts, which is exactly what steps is doing, so I have this domain and I'm splitting it up into 10 parts. So I have 10 of those numbers, including this as the starting and this as the ending. So as you can see in the output, I have 0.165 at the start, then I have 10 parts and it ends at 0.948. That's what the range component does. And if you can see, the range component is actually it is right here under sequence. So all of the previous components you can actually just select and use Alt, and you can actually see where it is located. Dispatch and cull index and cull pattern, all of these things are right here under sets. Now you can also see the series component. You are actually more familiar with the series component. We just used it in the previous topic. You basically have to input a start, step and the count. So the start is 0.000, step is 2, which means it will increase by 2. So you have 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and you have count, which means it will have 73 values, where it will start with 0 and it will increase by 2. So I have 0 to 72, which means I have 73 values, and it increases by 2. So you have 0 and 2 and 4 and 6 and 8, and it ends at 144. Now let's take a look at the merge component. The merge component basically merges two lists together. So if you have the first list and the second list that I have created manually, it basically gives you a merged of the two lists. So I have 0 1 0 1 and I have 1 2 3 4. As you can see, it has merged the two lists into one. You can do this with geometries, you can do this with a lot of other things. If you want to merge more than two lists, you can basically zoom in here. You see you have the minus sign to delete a list and the plus sign to increase a list. So if I click on this, it will give me D3 and D4 and D5, and you can use the fraction sign over here to basically delete these lists. Now let's take a look at the random component. The random component, I've taken the range from my range output over here because it asks for the range output. The random component is located right here. Now you also have the input as a number and a seed. Now a number is basically the number of random values. As you can see, it tells you. Now if you are confused as to what the input is, please keep your mouse icon on the input and it will actually tell you what the input really needs. So if I click on this random component, or if I just keep my mouse on this particular input, you see it actually tells you domain of random numeric range. So it asks for a range output. Over here you just need a number of random values, so which is 93. So I have 93 random values that I want, and it also asks for a seed. Seed is just a number that you can input which will actually keep on changing the entire construct of your random values. So I have these many random values. I have 93 random values, which is 0 to 92 over here, and I can just keep on changing these particular numbers using the seed. So if I decrease or increase the seed, you see all the values change. So I have 93 random values under this range with this particular seed. So that's it for this particular tab right here, which is the sets tab. So if you have downloaded the exercise files for this particular course, you will actually find all of these files under that folder, and you can actually open the sets tab, which is the second topic under chapter 3. In the next topic, let's explore the vector tab right here. We'll see all of these components, all of these elements, and we'll actually understand how the vector tab works, which contains 5 panels and 71 components.